Boom. They say that there are 3 levels of conversation. Level 1 is when people talk about other people. Level 2 is when people talk about events. There's nothing wrong with either of those, but this is Level 3 Studio. Level 3 is when people talk about ideas and what is possible. Welcome to Level 3 Studio, where we feed your body, feed your mind, without a doubt, feed your soul. Let's take a toast. Cheers. Thank you so much, all of you all, for being here. It means the world to me. This is a lot of fun doing this, and I truly, truly appreciate your time, your energy, your company. Cheers, 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 cheers. All right, that did just happen. 3 segments. Hopefully someone cries before we get out of here. That'll be my goal.
You'll be Adam.
All right, segment 1. A general term that people that come to this space normally really hate, but gets to the point, which is, what is it that you do, right? So segment 1 is all around, how do you prioritize? How do you organize? How do you strategize? So Adam, we'll throw you the first question, man, which is, if you have a million things to do in a day, what do you decide to do first?
So I generally do. And I mean, honestly,
practical question.
Yeah, so I prioritize the things I do first are the things that are going to help others do their job better. So if I can do something that's on my to-do list that enables someone else to do more, that's generally what I do first. So it's, so in our work, I always tell the team, it's like, I see my number 1 priority as being them. So
are you thinking or focusing internally, externally, kind of a...
Well, our work, it generally internal. I mean, as a leader, it's like if I can get a team of 6 people to operate more effectively, that's better than 1 person operating effectively. Yeah. So, and then I always figure I can give up sleep to catch up on the things that I didn't get done personally. So that's generally mine, is I try and allow others to work more effectively.
One thing I've always been fascinated by watching leaders is trying to see how do you absorb what it is others tell you and kind of just run according to what they've told you, or do you kind of try to match them with your belief, right, that's put you kind of in a leadership position to begin with, of maybe their abilities or maybe their perspective, or do you just generally just run with whatever the ask is that they have?
I definitely am not a run with whatever is asked. No, I mean, I think one of the things, and again, I think it's just what I do, whether I'm in a leadership position or not, is if you listen to what other people are actually saying, like in doing and observe, generally there's a bigger story there than the words that are actually coming out. So this has happened a number of times in the team where people are trying to put on, like I'm gonna get it done because but it's like, okay, I can tell this is a struggle. Like, let's talk about it. So I mean, had a good conversation this morning with a gal on our team, and kind of reading between the lines and said, hey, so you mentioned this. Here's what I heard in that. Is there some truth to that? And there was. So I think you can't say, well, that's what you said. I think a real leader has to actually truly listen and observe.
So I mean, culture is so big, and I think culture is one of the things that brings all of us here today, is kind of this realization that we need to, I don't want to say change culture, right, but build on top of culture. How do you do that, like practically? Like what does building culture in your world look like, so that whether it's that you can have that honest and intimate conversation, or just day-to-day operations keep moving forward?
One thing for me that I try and be is myself 24/7, right? Like, put ego at the door. I know I can be passionate at times. Katie can attest to this. It's like that can feel as though I'm being authoritative, but I've really just thought deeply about the work we do and cared deeply about it. And so, but this is where I'm at. This is what I think, and I'm going to share that. And the expectation is that those around me will as well. But one of the things I've had to learn a lot is because I am passionate, and is sometimes that comes across as authoritarian or authoritarian, and so I try and balance that with, and especially when you have introverts on your team that aren't like me, you really I've really had to find, and I still struggle with it, to give them the floor, instead of having, when this is where often I've been in the past, where I'm like, well, if I think I have something to offer, I take the floor. But I think many people aren't that way. So I mean, it's creating an environment where others feel like their opinion has a place, and then it's hard. I mean, when you're as passionate and think as deeply about these things as everyone here is, and the things that we do, to truly listen, and taking those other opinions, I definitely have found to be hard at times, and so I mean, that's something I try actively to do.
Brad, Keith, you guys are in positions where culture is like, building a positive, powerful culture is necessary for getting anything done on a day-to-day basis. It's a big topic, but let's start to try to, from your world, break it down. Like, how do you go about trying to build culture, and what type of culture do you try to build?
I like a lot of the things that Adam said. I try to be an enabler. If I can do things that will create efficiency for 27 other people, that's my work. If you had to encapsulate that in one or two words, the first word is going to be humble, right? A willing humility to say, this is the greater good, and it's not about me. I don't think, one other thing, I don't think the group of people with whom you surround yourself can never rise above your example. So I think I'm always cautious, and I'm not creating a false ceiling for my people.
No. When you talk about leading a culture, in particular a school culture, I think you have to lead by example. It kind of goes to the book that I'm reading, Lead Like a Pirate, is what I'm reading.
You getting commissions from them?
But no commissions. But definitely, I recognize that, I set the example and the tone, and it does start with leadership in the building. And so how I interact with kids, how I interact with staff, how do I interact with parents, just how I carry myself is a nonverbal characteristic that is important. And so we look at that, and our kids are looking at our teachers, of how they act and how they respond. And so I think you asked me what my word for the evening is, to be genuine. Yeah. I talked about being authentic, and that's being your true self. Yeah. It's time to have fun. It's time to get to know people. But we talk about building relationships. We've talked a lot about that tonight, and that is so powerful when you can build relationships with all the stakeholders that you have to build relationships with, and you can be your true self.
I want to jump in for a second. So I know Brad well. I know you after just our conversation, but both of you have been instrumental in you're only in it a year, or your first year, but in building a very obvious different culture, right? So much more progressive, innovative approach to creating a different paradigm for what education should be. You talked a lot about coming into an environment that's not super accepting of people that are different, and how, as a black man coming into an environment where there's a lot of division, how do you build that culture very intentionally?
Well, one, I let them know who I am. I mean, as far as I bring my kids around, I bring my family around, kind of that out of the box thinking. When we do PD, sometimes we get outside the building. We did a scavenger hunt in downtown Massachusetts streets. We have some fun. It's all about getting to know who they are, their family. I think, people love to let you know who they are over food. So people love to congregate over food. But definitely just kind of saying, hey, and having a vision and being able to articulate the why we need to do certain things and where we're going. And I think people can decide whether they want to get on board with the vision and understanding the why we need you to do whatever the X, Y, or Z is. And so throughout the year, you can tell who's getting on board with the idea of where we're going. But if a leader can't really truly express and be consistent with sharing the vision that's supposed to be, for the building, then that's why sometimes I think people struggle with getting on the old terminology, getting on the bus.
Yeah.
People can't get on the bus if they don't know where we're going. And so you have to have a very clear-cut, concise vision and talk about that and talk about the steps of mapping it out. One of you things talked about your question, we have a vision wall in my building. And the vision wall has the 4 or 5 things that we say we're about, and we map it out. It's a 3-year strategic plan of what we hope to accomplish and what we're going to do, and then how we're going to get there. But that's something that goes back to my personal life. I have a vision wall in my home of how, I take education, I take health, I take family, and I take my career, and I break it down of what do you want to do in the year, and how do you plan to do it. And so that's a lot of time when you don't have a vision, and then you don't put the action plan or the steps in place to say, hey, this is what we want to achieve in the first 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And are you doing small assessments along the way to check in to see, are we hitting the market? Are we on the goal or whatnot? And I think when you have short-term wins, people start to get excited about seeing the possibilities of what could be when they say, oh man, I see it.
Let me ask the other way, and maybe, vulnerably, like coming into this space where it's just like, you feel like you're just always on, all of the time. And so on your worst days, or maybe scale it back, on a rough day, like what do you feel like gets in the way of, whether internally, the way you operate, like leading with yourself first and being transparent, or just in a system, in an organization, like on a tough day, what do you feel like gets in the way?
I stop and you asked this gentleman, what does he do on a busy day? I have to do my devotional, my debrief. So I put on my music, I jam in the car, whether it's gospel music that morning, where I want to feel upbeat, I put my ratchet rap music on. Whatever mood I'm in, I'll play it in the morning just to kind of decompress. And because I know once my car hits the parking lot and I go through the door, I'm on. I mean, I can literally get out of my car and they say, Dr. Jones, you got a second.
With 1 foot out.
1 foot out. A parent will catch you out. Yeah. As soon as you go into the door, you might have somebody wait. And this is an hour and a half before school starts. And so I know that I'm on all the time. So I have a prayer partner. I usually pray with my prayer partner on the way to work. Or sometimes I take that 5 or 10 minutes once I get in my office. And once I've kind of gotten myself mentally together, then I know that I'm there. I don't say I'm a problem solver. That's what I do all day. Is listen to the problems. But when I know when Keith is not right, it's hard for me to lead others. And that's how I know we talked about those wellness days that we have in my school. When teachers are not right, because they have problems with, divorce, their kids, sickness, whatever. It's hard for them to teach kids.
Right. They're humans too,
They're humans. And so we know that people's mental and physical health is so vital to the success of our students in the classroom. Because if the teacher's not right, just like if the building leader is not right, then I don't have the tolerance or the patience to sit and listen about whatever your issue is. Right. And so that's where, how do you get into a space where you can do that? And I guard that.
Yeah. Brett, I don't want to ask from a systems point of view, do we have the capacity to do that, right? Because that'd be a tough question to answer. But from your perspective, how and to Adam's point, how are you building the capacity to do innovative things inside of a system?
First of all, innovation is it's not something you can buy. It is not a paint that can be applied. It cannot be unwrapped. It is taught and learned. It is taught and learned, and it occurs between people. So I work very carefully I have to lead them well. I try to lead them well. I have to treat them better. The most important work inside an organization is the environment, and that is entirely within our control. The work of my people isn't my responsibility. My people are my responsibility, right? And I think if you approach any task in that way, that's how you crush it. And you know, these guys, people that know me well, know that I'm an operations guy. I want to execute. 5 years ago, I wasn't like that because the team wasn't ready, right? You can execute with incredible efficiency when you're surrounded by people who feel your weaknesses, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned a word earlier, Nick. You used the word vulnerable, right? I tag that right in there with humility. I got to be vulnerable and humble enough to say, listen, I'm not right. I'm not that broad. I've got to have an Adam who can talk broadly about vision and mission. You put two Legos in front of me and I can't get them together fast enough. You know what I'm saying? So
always backwards.
Yeah.
And leaders are attracted to that. So when you find a district level or, you know, someone who's overseeing the system, and I'm saying, man, how do my talents or what I bring to the table fit inside an organization? Because really it's about relationships. I work for people that I can dream with, that I can build with. We've talked about the term, let's build. Like if he has a vision for where his district is going, and I can say, man, I'm about what he's doing. People want to go to work for that. People are attracted to greatness. People are attracted to results also too. Like, you know, and you know, just like what Rita Pearson talked about in their TED Talks, kids don't learn from people they don't like.
That's so true.
People don't want to work. People don't want to work.
People don't want to work
for people they don't like.
Yeah.
And if we ain't on the same page, then you can go do your thing and I'm gonna do my thing. And so when you got that great synergy, once you talked about people who believe in the same where we're going, then great things can happen.
How do you all cultivate the visions that you have, and maybe take the time to break down the vision to the extent that you articulate it right now? How do you cultivate your vision?
That's a great question. Lots and lots of people curate I won't say very few. There are more curators than cultivators.
Like more people picking and pulling parts.
Lots of people can move things and call it different. Very few people cultivate, and I think this is Adam. I think you can speak to this just because you know I think you're an example of it. What the village was 8 years ago, and what it is now. Is I think the answer to Nick's question, and it's about endurance. Endurance and commitment. You know, you have to rejoice through your suffering because suffering creates endurance. Endurance creates character, and it's your character that gives you hope, right? And that's what I see, you know, over the years at the village, and that's. Tell me 5 years ago, if I'd have come up to you and said, hey, you're going to be the CEO of a startup foundation, what would you have told me? I hadn't even imagined that. Yeah. Right. So commitment, endurance, and again, surrounding yourself with people who feel your weaknesses.
Yeah. Take the time to walk through that. And as far as you want to go, but I'd love for you to catch up to where you guys are at today on diving into education and how you think you can take a swing at it.
For me, it's forethought. And
she crossed the barrier of touching.
No, you
like,
made me self-conscious about it. I'm not touching it. It's forethought. It's kind of like legacy work. You're thinking 3, 5, 10, 15 years into the future, and I'm thinking of like, what will I regret not having done? And I'm a mom, and I have an 8-month-old, and I'm like thinking really specifically about her. I'm like, what will I regret not having done, not having tried to build for her in this, and what she's going to be a part of, and what she's going to inherit in her community and in her society. and it's thinking about that and like really boiling down the essentials, right? We had a conversation with some teachers in Excelsior the other day where we had to, like, they're doing some great stuff, but encourage them, like, you know, you're not going to ruin these students' lives when you don't teach about this historical event, you know, or the details of this battle. Like, really boil down, like, what is essential, what is important, you know, what are the concepts that are important, what are they going to latch onto right now, what that's, you know, that's in the curriculum application. But what I think when we're talking about what kind of students are we churning out of the education system, and what do they need to look like, you know, how prepared do they need to be, what do they need to be able to do, and making, and no matter what, just saying, like, you know, a thing we hear all the time is like, we can't afford to do XYZ because of XYZ. Usually it's like an AP test that they teach to or whatever, and we're like, no, we just think you can't afford not to, and that vision of you know, like, I think the legacy we're leaving behind.
As you look at it right now, like, is it legit, like, at whatever cost necessary, or do you have, like, how do you pace yourself? Like, I love the idea, like, we can't afford not to, but where do you draw the line? Have you, like, do you think about it in that extent?
What do you expand on that?
Let me say one sentence.
Go ahead.
It might. You don't have to spend 30 minutes a day for 3 of the 5 school days during a week talking about something that kids can Google. Let's get past that and talk about the impact, or let's synthesize it or analyze it instead of that.
Yeah, I mean.
Okay, that wasn't an enthusiastic. Yeah, you crushed it, Brad. Way to go. That was not that.
No, I 100%.
Go ahead, Rachel. Go ahead.
I mean, I can answer, I think what you just asked.
Yeah,
I haven't figured out the place to draw the line yet. I don't think, like, for
me,
me,
what's
like,
the line? What's the line we're talking about? Like,
so, like, legacy, yeah, like, thinking, right? 15 years down the line, and also, like, how is it 2018 and this hasn't happened yet, right? So for me, I get stuck in the, like, what I want to see in 15 years, but also, like, that just the urgency of, like, right now. Like, I have 8th graders who need this right now, not in 15 years for the kids who are 8th graders then.
I don't know how to describe the moment, but it was this moment where it was like, okay, I'm trying to make an impact and create change, and it's a difference in the system. But when it comes down to it, it's like you want to feel your pace and yourself, man. And so I thank you, dude, for, like,
of course,
bringing that moment into it, man.
Of course,
that was it for me, man. Ooh.
And definitely that's how I feel, you know, the traditional educators, you know, that's something that they really need to know, and that's a big point, you know, that most of them are missing. But, you know, the people that were here, you know, they seem very compassionate, and those that really wants to have that personal connection.
Because I still believe a systems approach is the way we save a generation. Like, for every 1 or 2 people we're able to grab, like, the system's failing.
Right.
Still thousands of them. But this outlet, man, has been one that's made me feel like, even though we can't go out there and change the whole system, like, we can rally ourselves and build ourselves, man. I'm excited for this opportunity for you, man.
No, thank you, man. I'm feeling great, man. I got the call today when I was in the barber chair. So it was
in the chair,
yeah.
Fresh cut.
And I'm like,
fresh call.
God, I really couldn't hear it too, so I knew I was kind of sounding dumb. I'm like, God, you know what? I'm gonna just call you right back. So as soon as I got there, like, I was kind of stuck, because, like I said, man, when these things happen, they happen so fast. So it's like,
you gotta be prepared.
Exactly. And I was just talking to y'all last week, like, I really want to move to LA in 3 years. get a call.
Out
you know
out the
what I'm
blue?
saying? Yeah, you know.
Or
what
was
I'm saying?
it wasn't through like your time out there? It was just out the
No,
blue?
This was out the blue.
Found you
Like,
on IG?
Yeah, on Instagram, and that's just once again the power of Instagram and the power of hashtag. It's like what's going on in this new generation and what's happening is very powerful. You know, it's forward, it's straightforward. You know that we don't have to pay. You know what I'm saying, thousands of dollars just to market ourselves when you got these free networks that people are actually looking at. And you know, I just did this food day last weekend, and this girl, she was in town just from Houston, and she said she found me literally just by clicking on the hashtag KC Eats. And
That's how I think. I don't know if that's how I found you. I may have saw you. I know there were two people that referenced me to you, but the very first thing I did when we're doing this show, we want to have a chef, is I went to hashtag KC Chefs, you know, and just started just seeing who's on there, you know. But good. Like that's so powerful, man. Why not try to pull at that nugget, man? Like practicality of that. Like how have you used it? What do you like? Are you real intentional with Instagram and how you use it?
Yes, I'm getting more intentional with it now because it can be an extra area of revenue coming in if you do it the right way, and if you build your account up the right way, or you know you're getting that following base that you need, that target market, and especially if you're learning.
Are you real big on engaging with kind of the community?
Oh, definitely as well too. Just because of the simple fact, you know, like I said, that's how people find you.
Yeah.
One of the, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think one of the pillars that was arising out of this, and we're going through this, right, and we're getting into it, and sorry, this is for this workshop for teachers and educators, and we realized that we're like 24-hour people, and just because of the training, right, a lot of teachers are school day people. Like I'm a teacher during the school day. And we're maybe more so because we're in non-traditional, like chicken or the egg, or we're in non-traditional spaces because of this, or whatever the case. But like there's nothing, and this might be, and this scares the hell out of my mother, but there's nothing I won't walk away from that doesn't serve me, right? Like nothing. I've been homeless for 9 months working towards something that mattered more than having a roof. And I think it was that experience. And then like, I mean, you said it perfect, like character breeds hope, like building that character, like going through that, now I'm like, well, hell, if the things that I thought mattered more than anything don't really matter as much as living intentionally, well, now we got a chance. But I'm also very realistic in knowing that that's not realistic for a lot of people. You know, like I want people to feel secure and safe and have a home and build a family. But where's the
10 years ago, I wouldn't have answered the questions in the same way.
No, would you have known the same answer? You just wouldn't have said them?
It's kind of, I'll put it to you this way, and Keith will understand this. I've had to apologize to my 17-year-old many, many, many more times than I have my 12-year-old, right? Because I'm not the same dad that I was, right? I remember my first year as a superintendent. Man, I would go back and do that one again. And you just become more cognizant, and I wish I would have learned 20 years ago about how to get the most out of people. But I think in the grand scheme of things, like when, let's just say somebody comes forward in the next year with the map, the road map, and at the end of that road map is us crushing, education.
More than anything, I want you to say what's on your heart. Nothing is more important than us in this moment. So, you felt you seemed you had something to say, but I want to hear your thought too for both of you. So whichever, on vision and on, was it how the intentionality at the beginning of it to where you're at now in your work. What part of it has remained the same, and what part of it has been different?
I want to speak to. So I have two boys.
Man, I'm pissed I lost.
I have two sons, and I think, it has helped me kind of refine and refresh my vision. You know what I'm saying? You look at what my task is. Well, my sons are in the system.
Yeah.
And so it makes it a little more real when, I have a 17-year-old that is in high school. So does he have the skill sets and the things that he needs to be successful once he leaves? And then I have a 5-year-old who's a kindergartner that will have different experiences than my 17-year-old. And, as a building leader or as I am a leader in my job, am I preparing kids to be successful outside when they leave education? We look at what are some things that are important to the well-rounded, the well-being of a person. Community service, self-respect, learning to collaborate and work with others. All these social skills and the academic skills they need, how do you merge the two? So when I look at, the vision of where, our district is going or where our building is going, how do I embed those life experiences for kids to apply, mess up, try, they don't like, but get exposed to entrepreneurs or people that are in the community that are doing different things? How do I provide those things and give kids the vision to see themselves that this is my possibility? Because I have kids from all walks of life. Some kids don't think they're going to college. Some kids don't because their parents didn't go to college or whatever the vision is. So our opportunity is to make sure every kid that walks through those doors believes that they can achieve whatever they think they can. And so how do I do that? Keeping that in front of them,
One thing I struggle with, maybe it's just because I work with freshmen in high school, dear God. But like, but the very practical, and I've really dove into this a little bit more, but the very practical understanding of just cognitive development, right? It's a kid, he's growing, his brain's not all the way there yet, versus the conditions of his environment, right, that restrain him. And like, do you try to go by the books and like a 12-year-old is developed here, and so we kind of try to create opportunities for them at that level, or does kind of by the books development is not as much a priority? Like, I'm curious.
Well, I deal with middle school students, so that's already kind of a wacky time frame. But they're smart enough to see the big picture. And most of them have brothers and sisters that are in high school or in college or whatnot, so they see kind of where they want to go. They just don't know how to get there or understand the value of what they're learning now and how that impacts the future. Like, it's hard to build on this when you're trying to get to step 10, but you skipped 5 through 8. So. Just teaching them to understand that. But surely but surely you see kids get it. The light bulb turns on. It's more about meeting their needs, making sure they're safe, making sure you instill some confidence, those type of things that they need to know at the level that I'm at in order to be successful.
There's if you go back and study some theories in psychology, you've got.
Did I say that?
Huh?
Yeah, I was just about to jump on that.
Yeah, you want it?
No.
Oh, here, let me serve it up for you.
I'm just gonna piggyback on whatever you say.
Okay.
So here's what I was hearing you say is in response to what you asked, Nick, is that you were talking to Maslow's hierarchy of needs and self-actualization.
Yeah.
These things are Maslow's is universal, Bloom's taxonomy is universal, higher order thinking is universal. Kindergartners, if anything, have a more natural inclination towards higher order thinking. It's we as the system are kind of beating that out of the higher order thinking out of them, right? We've talked about that, the paperclip example of there's research around this. They put a paperclip in front of different age kids and they track it over time. They ask kindergartners how many uses for this paperclip are you able to think of, and kindergartners like hundreds, thousands. And the more you go up, when it gets more and more literal, you put it in front of high school or adults, and it's like 4.
This is where I'm at right now. Like, is that intentional? And we can, and this is where we decide how far about this conversation. But
I don't think it's intentional. I think it is systemic. You either.
Maybe not personally intentional.
Well, when you look at what was 20th century education supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
So then you think, so then you think, okay, is it intentional to, I'll use a safe word as confining, right? To be confining for a mass of people, or is that just where we're at now, and it's quote unquote to no one's fault, right? And we're all trying to fix it, or is there someone? What I'm getting at is, in your line of work, and is there someone holding it in place to where it's at, knowing that it needs to change?
I think it's intentional in that there's so many excuses of, oh, well, if we let kids go that far, then like this bad thing might occur, or like we need more teachers, like behavior issues might happen. I mean, I think it's intentional in that. I don't think that administration or teachers, of that matter, are willing to take down
or it's systemic in that they're like, we can't measure it. That kind of creativity is not measurable, and we need things to be measurable. I mean, you guys experience that, right?
Yeah. A little bit. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how to measure what I'm doing. I haven't figured that out.
But the answer to that is therefore not do it.
And feel the vibe. Yeah, listen to what kids are saying.
But they're like,
I don't try to, and it's to my own detriment. I can be my own detriment, right, prospectively. But I just kind of, and that's why I'm curious as we started this conversation, like trusting yourself and going, like, I do what I know is right for me. And if I was wrong, I'll learn and I'll do what's right for me the next time. And it'll be a little more educated, like Brad said, like if I would have like 20 years ago. And I just try to go by that and trust that whether it's in a system or it's out of it at a point in time or I weave in between, that'll be right. But I don't want to try to force that mentality on people. Although I believe it to be a right, like ride with what you think is right to the grave. And you'll probably live, God willing, and then ride to what you think is right again the next time.
I'm going to take care of my kiddos, right? I'm going to do everything, my wife and 3 kids. I'm going to make sure that they're as safe as they can be. There are some structural byproducts of that, right? Katie's got her 25 kids in her class, right? Dr. Jones has his 600, 800, 1,200 kids in the building. We have 15,000 kids in Independence, right? So there are some limitations that are put on space and logistics because of they're our responsibility, okay? Now, I think there are some very overt things we can do as far as training toward instruction to overcome that. And it really highlights, in my opinion, the most important people in this conversation about education, and it's teachers. We were having a conversation, earlier over by the table, and I don't know a teacher that's got that keeps the magic lesson in their pocket, saying, "Man, I can't wait until it feels right, and I'm gonna pull this great lesson out." They're functioning at capacity. If you want to increase capacity, you have to teach them something, right? And to, I'll defend that.
Give them permission.
There you go. See, and I guess that's where I'm going is, at the district level, we are absolutely 100% responsible for 15,000 kiddos, just like I am at my house, right? But I can also, I'm not going to put my kids in a bubble. I'm going to give them some permission. And I'm going to buy them a dirt bike, right? Or I'm going to there are opportunities for us to change the norm.
Are you all focused on trying to kind of weigh down the other side, whether on how do we measure the value that lies in we'll just say innovation for the sake of, right? Do you focus on trying to measure that, or do you just do things that you know are right and try to find the people that can gather around and do it with you?
I definitely have my head around measurement sometimes. I mean, I'm constantly questioning it and wondering. I don't think measurement is bad, but I think what we decide to measure and how we're measuring it is important, needs to be called into question. I think qualitative data can be collected and standardized. I don't think it has to be something that's just super easy to gather and aggregate and analyze. I think that, and that's what I feel like you were asking. Like, are we like anti-measurement?
Are you just setting out, like, is there something, and maybe I think where my mind went is like the Mecca challenge. Is there like a particular, well, we'll say metric, right, for the sake of, that you're trying to gather enough to like weigh the scale to then like be able to advocate, like with weight.
I'll tee one up for Adam here. I'm gonna literally tee that. Swing as hard as you want, Okay, if you want to increase achievement, you got to have attendance. The metric, attendance. Attendance, right? If you want achievement, then you have to have bottoms in seats, because if they're not getting exposed to the instructions, they're not gonna grow. Okay, if you want attendance, you have to engage students. You have to interest them, right? If you want to engage them, then you have to give the teachers the tools to do something different. The only way to do that, so you've got achievement to attendance, attendance to engagement, engagement to instruction, and that's professional development. That's that tool. If you want to increase their capacity to teach them something, and that professional development typically is done by leaders. So you have to have leaders who are reflective of every one of those steps, and take opportunities like putting 30 teachers at a Mecca challenge. It's the difference between handing somebody a fish and teaching them how to fish. Tell me you can't run with that.
Well, I haven't talked much, and I have lots of thoughts. So I'm the only one that hasn't spent formal time a part of the education system other than having graduated from it. You know, as I observe and listen, you know, one question is like, why do we keep doing what we're doing? I think, you know, we talk a lot about soft skills. There's as big a skills gap as there ever has been, and it's growing every day. I think the number one soft skill that people learn right now in school is obedience, and that is not the skill that creates success. I think we're all a product of that system, and so we're obedient to it, and we do it because we're supposed to, because we're obedient. That's why this system was created, right? It was to be an obedient army of factory workers that would do the same thing every time the same way, and we still operate that way. I think things like you know, light caps and like Mecca and like these different things, the soft skill that employers and industry is demanding is people with confidence and self-awareness, right? Because we're in a world that there are very rarely one answer. And so you have to have confidence that you can figure it out, and you have to have the self-awareness of knowing what role you play in a team. So to me, this is why we're in the position we're in, because we're all doing what we are trained to do, is be obedient. I think so the other thing, I think that because the system is built on obedience, and yet what is needed is self-confidence and self-awareness. What happens is, for those that aren't successful in the system that defines success and smart as one thing, those that are good at taking tests, I was, my brother was not. So I came out with confidence, and who knows if I'd be here today if there wasn't this, and whether it was deserved or not. My brother was not good at taking tests, and the system did the exact opposite for him. To this day, he talks about being dumb. To this day, he can't ask for help because he wants to prove he can do it on his own. He is an award-winning brewer, starting his own brewery, and 28. And the biggest thing holding him back stems back to the lack of confidence he has, right? And the need to prove himself, even when he's not good at a particular piece of this. And so I see that every day, and it very much drives me. You know, coming back, I never talked about the vision or the why. So for me, the why is unleashing the potential of a community. And obviously, you know, where is so much, what I've realized, where so much innovation or so much potential is stifled is in the education system that it exists. And in why the Startup Foundation, I believe that the biggest catalyst for change is the entrepreneurial spirit that doesn't accept the status quo as acceptable. You know, we aren't obedient. Not like, and one of the things that I think a lot is, it's not about changing things for the sake of changing. Sometimes the way things are appropriate, and it's the best way for things to be. But I think, and especially in a conservative Midwest community, often comfort is the goal, right? It's a comfortable place to raise a family. It's a comfortable place, whatever. And so anything that changes the status quo is a threat to that comfort. But I think
without even contemplating what the other side
that we simply do it because that's the way we've always done it. And I think thoughtfully creating discomfort is how we're going to create change. So how do you start conversations that get people to change their paradigm? How do you go into a school where there's the white middle upper class and the diverse lower class, and there's very little division? You have to create dialogue. You have to create opportunities for people, because you have to make it approachable. If it's unapproachable, people will avoid it because people avoid discomfort, especially in a place like this. So much of our work, and this is where I don't think I do a good job of painting a vision of where this organization is going, because I don't know. And I think if you paint a black and white vision for an organization that exists to create discomfort along the way, we ourselves have to be uncomfortable as well. So I don't know where it goes. All that we try and do is assess the next best step in creating the change we want to see. And so the way I always think about it, and so many people ask, like, how do you work through ambiguity so well? I think of it as a huge staircase. You can't jump to the top. You have to take a step. And so what I obsess over every day is, what is the next best step we can be taking? And then let's take it and do it with as much dedication as passion as we possibly can. Because I don't know what's beyond that. And if we try to predict it, then you can get focused on building towards something that proves to be wrong.
And what I feel like you're talking about that is like a soft skill that I would highlight that we don't talk about is courage, right? We it's just just doing it and going and like even just I'm gonna take the step today, and I don't know where it's gonna lead. I mean, we encounter this when we're talking to teachers that are breaking outside of the paradigm all the time, but it's like even just our presence is like affirming for them. We experienced this yesterday because we're like, yeah, you're doing it, like, and here's this industry partner and here's this industry partner, and they're like, what, this is like real, and they feel so there's this like courage is also not something that we are teaching. We're especially not teaching girls it in general, but we are really not teaching it, and it's how you lead.
Well, I think a big moment for me, so learning kind of just how education works. I'm still like this conversation is enlightening, right? This is all learning for me. But yesterday when we were talking to those educators, one of the things that stood out to me was how scary it is for kids to know that kids are scared. But I think it's through that being uncomfortable, where these kids are so used to having a rubric, having a worksheet, having whatever, and we don't give it to them, and they have to create, which is a lot of what you're doing. And yes, right, is when you give them, by the time they're in high school, it's scary. When they're in elementary school, it's everything they love, right? And just look at that paradigm, right? And you're in the middle.
So what I was going to say is, what's interesting is the community we serve. So different communities have different expectations, right? And so you talk about being creative and innovative. What about the parent that comes home and says, "But I want my kid to have the A"?
Yeah.
What is that? I want the.
Do you look into how successful that parent? Do you?
Right now I'm in a college town where most of them are professors, lawyers, doctors. I mean, we have some.
So it served them extremely well.
Yes. Some
Academia is the thing that's honored. Yeah.
And so therefore, when you start challenging their kids' experience, something that's different, it goes against the grain of what their success is, and even mine.
Yeah,
I'm a product of a traditional, of a traditional. He told me move. Sorry, I wasn't trying to. Right. He said it. So
I pushed mine away so I quit talking.
No. Like, so when you are serving a population of community members that have been successful off of traditional schools and traditional mindsets, when you push the box and say, hey, we're going to do things this differently, there's a resistance and to grading or to any type of.
Well, and I think the other thing is specific to that. The leaders in the education world are there because they were successful at this system, right? So they are the most threatened, oftentimes, by fundamentally changing it, right? And especially in a community that's built on educational excellence, right?
I wrote down 4 words that when you talked about some social skills that I was thinking that our students need or people need in general. Flexibility, being coachable. What is perseverance? How do you teach a kid perseverance? And endurance. And then intrinsic motivation. I think sometimes kids are intrinsically motivated, but why? So what gave them the hope? What gave them the experience to be like, I want to do that? And what does it take to do that? Because I've met some kids that are just lazy. They're not motivated.
I have thoughts on that, but I want to hear you.
I mean, I just had 2 quick thoughts on Keith's statement of, like, what about the parents who are like, this is a traditional situation and my child needs a 4.0, right? I grew up that way, I get that. But I think I can speak for probably all teachers who are willing to, like, say, well, forget the traditional thing. I'm gonna teach entrepreneurship to kindergartners. At that point, the grade doesn't matter. I'm not gonna fail a child who's willing to try, or like willing to be creative and take a chance, right? So grading changes.
Right.
My kids passed my class for coming and
Like halfway through the semester, I said, everyone here is getting an A. Everyone's getting an A right now. So all you know, everyone's getting an A. Now what are we gonna do? In my mind, that was a good idea. To these freshmen, wasn't a good idea, but I have to try.
like, sweet.
Right, but I have to try because there was a few, and here's the blessing, but the challenge is there was a small enough number that we don't care as a system about it, but a few that were like, oh, I can do something now I don't have to worry about that, and I can go and do something. And that tension between the 3 that like, those 3 now are gonna go do something crazy in life, in a perfect world, but versus it's not the big number.
Doesn't it change with adults? I've had recently my first experience teaching at the university level. So I'm an adjunct professor at one of the colleges in Lawrence, and had the opportunity to teach adults or people who want to be principals. And what amazed me about my first year of teaching at the collegiate level was so many people they were concerned. That's all they wanted was the grade. Let me see my checklist so I can do the things on your checklist, and I can get my A.
Yeah.
And I was caught up in the experience. I'm in the trenches as a real principal saying, this is what you need to know. We're going to talk about ethics. We're going to talk about law. We're going to talk about these things, giving them real things they can apply and chew on. It was like, what? I'm not trying to do all that. What do I need to do to get my grade? And so they had learned school, which I see in my community that is an educated community. And so that's why we're looking at how we grade, because a lot of our kids have learned school. Have a lot of, oh man, they come in, they're nice, they're polite, they turn things in on time, they know how to come in for extra credit, they know all that stuff. But what do they really know? And so when we look at that, what we measure, when we look at the test data, or when we start looking at it, we say, man, you're not even in the top percentile of whatever, or your MAP scores are not coming back correctly, but you're a straight A student. And or the kids that, man, you have a lot of problems, you're in and out of trouble. I see all the time, but man, you knocked it out on that math and English, because academically they're sound, but behaviorally and socially they're not there. And so we've seen all types of parallels and correlations between, what are we measuring what kids really know, or people just learn the game. And some of my kids in my community, they learn the game. They learn from their parents. And they come in, they're nice, they smile, so how do we do that?
So if I told you today, so there's 2 kinds of shoe tires, right?
2 kinds of what?
Shoe tires.
Shoe tires.
Tying the shoe.
People who tie shoes.
Right. I'm
It's really hard for half the
shoe tire.
That's like a term from the 40s or something.
Phoenix, you were born in the 40s.
I'm
I'm just kidding.
a one loop guy, right?
You were a kid.
I'm a one loop guy. I wrap and pull. There are bunny ears, people.
Yep. Loop,
Right?
swoop, pull.
Loop, swoop, pull. If I told you today,
Couldn't never figure it out.
if I told you today that you had to start tying your shoes a different way, it would take you 8 weeks of intentionally doing it before it became muscle memory. Okay? Before you could just, without thinking about it, in a dark room, reach down and tie your shoe. That's just tying a shoe. We're talking about changing a mindset of 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 20-year-old teachers and 50-year-old teachers and leaders and community. This is where I was going earlier.
You found your point.
I found my point.
Brought it back.
If someone came out today and said, here's the plan, right? And it was less than a month long, I'm out. Because change is, I mean, we're talking about 5, 8 years before there's even a measurable metric. And it starts between the ears, right?
I want to know more about Katie and you all's journey thus far into this work. The things that you feel like have been most transferable, and the things that you feel like you've run into a wall with trying to bring this type of thinking and behavior and mindset and action into a more rigid space.
Katie's obviously joined the journey a little bit later, so I think she can jump in. But for me when I came in, I had no intention of doing any of this.
Mhm.
This was never the plan, right? The plan was to unlock the
Give me a
potential.
timeline here, like what?
Okay,
okay.
so running an internet startup, 2012, end up officing in the first neighborhood that got Google Fiber. We start having all these tours of kids, and I mean,
You couldn't stop
international
it. You
kids,
just,
it was
yeah.
just all over the place. Like it was just school groups all over the place. So, fall of 13, we did our first Mecca Challenge. Actually, it was a grant through KCC. So Jay Matlack was working there at the time. Said we want to work with a startup village to do this event. And literally, the objective of the first Mecca Challenge was let's just connect students with startups. I think they'll think it's cool, right? And it'll be a fun event. And I think I think we all underestimate kids.
Yeah.
So let's give them a real challenge to solve and did. So cool, that was great, fun time. Like really cool to see how these kids really engaged. Next year, found some funding, did it one more time. Great. But like it was 3 days, wasn't scalable. It's like, okay, we literally almost trashed it. Like, well, let's try and do it in one day. Did it one day with Shawnee Mission School District, went really well. In the spring of 15, fall of 15, we did 4. Because the point was, can we scale it? Did 4, it went well. Then I was like, will people actually pay us for it? Started charging, we did 7. Okay, like now we're going somewhere. Like what is it about this that people are flocking towards, right? And the whole structure for, so you know what it is it's one day. Kids come in, they don't know what challenge they're gonna be working on. We present a real world challenge. Now we've really started giving them big like social challenges. And we put them in teams of 6 and give them an entrepreneur as a mentor for the day. And literally it's here's your challenge, 3 hours later they have to present a solution. And there's no structure in how they do that. They have to come together as a team with an entrepreneur that's used to working in ambiguity all the time to help guide them to be able to present a solution 3 hours later. And we didn't know what we were building, that it was really giving them many of these kids the first time ever to just be innovative, just solve problems, not on a worksheet, not prescribed, not academic, but real. And so we work to bring in organizations that actually want student perspective on a particular problem and that are working to solve it. So we've been doing that now the last 2 years, 16 and 17. We did 16 a year, about 2,000 kids went through it, and it's great. All of this, the whole time, I was like, okay, we're starting to give kids these experiences where they can then, become the people we need in this world.
Right.
And we were so focused on putting on events. and just trusting that this would be the spark that would inspire them to change and go back. Well, what we have ultimately realized, and we were just really fixated on putting on a badass event, and that's what we do. It's a great event. But we realized that then the kids would go back to environments that did anything but reinforce what they just experienced. And so all we were creating was an amazing field trip. It was a field trip. And that's not the point. Like, if we're wanting to create change, field trips aren't that. But what we realized is we built this army of passionate believers and just people that saw in this spark in their kids in the one-day experience of what they could be. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times people say, we've never seen our kids this engaged. Right? And you take off the training wheels, give them some freedom, say you're going to present this to all of your peers and a panel of judges. They're going to bust their ass to come up with something real, right? And they are being entrusted with solving this problem, right? And so, okay, so great. But now we realize that we are busting our butts to create as many of these as possible, and we're like, it's a drip in the ocean. So now what we've shifted, and this is where we brought in Katie, and she can kind of jump in here, is so now we have it's all of the early adopter teachers, all the teachers that understand the mindset. Their mindset is changing. They're going out and they're sending their kids to an event that is not being put on by a traditional educational organization. And we have no credentials whatsoever, other than we're working with the game changers in our community. And they believe that their kids, and they see the impact of their kids when they get to do this. So now what we realize is we have identified a lot of the early adopters, those that are already changing their mindset, but they aren't being surrounded by the resources and partners to help them bring that to the classroom. And that's really where
Feel free to pick up. I'm curious though, up to that point, if you've been able to get a pulse, is it that they're more on the side, if you had to pick, more on the side of believing that they can innovate from within, or they're like, if you give us a solid enough reason, we'll try to build a castle on the other side of the street?
Teachers, you're talking about teachers?
Yeah, if that's
or school leaders, or I would say the people we're working with are everything from a rogue teacher that's just like, screw it, my kids need this.
Rachel.
And Rachel, well, I mean, in terms of who,
Previous experience.
yeah,
in
terms of who we work with, and sending their kids to a Mecca or whatever, all the way up to assistant supers, right? And it's everywhere in between. So what we're trying to be is as flexible, as responsive as possible to meet people where they're at, and connect their world that is often the opposite of innovative to our world that is only innovation.
One of my driving questions is, how can we get students innovating and creating in the classroom as the norm and not the exception, right? How can we do that as fast as possible? Right, and in the most authentic way. I don't mean creating like they make a poster, which is a very big barrier, right? When you're using language with teachers, is like, to give you kind of an anecdote, when I did a semester-long design thinking project in my classroom with high school seniors, their actual project was around, they were identifying problems within education or within their particular school, and this design team had latched onto this problem with a lack of creativity in school. And they collected, in the problem validation phase, they collected data, and they gave essentially the same survey to staff and students, and asking, had them look at Bloom's taxonomy. By the way, I always like to tell, they pointed me to Bloom's taxonomy. They're like, have you ever heard of this Bloom's taxonomy? But they were explaining it to me, and I'm like, yeah, I've heard of it. But it was awesome to hear them teaching me about things they were discovering in research. So they sent out a survey, staff and students, asking them essentially the same thing of like, where are you on Bloom's? Yeah, I'm not gonna touch it, you know that. And what's happening in your classes, essentially, where on this Bloom's chart. And you probably like know where this is going, but students by and large say we're down here in recall and remember, right? And teachers say we're evaluating and creating. And I genuinely don't know if it's like a lack of self-reflection or lack of honesty, or just a lack of like really knowing what those things mean. But often when we say creating and innovating in class, teachers are like, yeah, I'm doing that. They're like, they have a project that culminates in like a poster or a presentation. We're like, no, like real problems and real solutions.
Well, in this, I don't mean for. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, teachers, the way they think, so they probably don't think that way. When I keep kind of just trying to apply what you guys are talking about, I'm thinking about having a hybrid of how do I allow teachers to have that space. For example, we just had a STEM project week where my entire 6th grade, the core classes came together and did a STEM project. So kids had 4 or 5 opportunities. They were grouped in teams of, I think, 6. It's interesting that you said that. And they had 4 days to come up with their they had all kind of type of materials, supplies, and they had to create whatever the STEM project was. That was a way for them to be creative, and that was allowing teachers to let some of that control go. Because you gotta look, teachers, how do we help teachers become facilitators versus
Right.
sage on the stage,
Yeah.
That term, so how do we do that and take some of that control? But that's a mindset shift, that's PD, that's a lot of different things, and you have to have a leader that believes that way.
Exactly, giving them permission, giving them the freedom,
that's scary.
saying this test, in whatever week isn't your end goal. This is the end goal. Changing the goalposts.
The school I work at it's like shit can go down in a matter of seconds if things aren't under control, like physically. Like
Chaos.
someone's gonna get knocked
chaos.
out in 5 minutes. But you need the positive side is you need that controlled chaos. But fear is an interesting topic we've weaved in and out of. But fear controls so much of. I don't mean to put such a huge blanket, right? But urban schools, and especially people leading urban schools that aren't from an urban community, or just if something happens, in that space.
Can I take a prime example? Please. You're talking to a guy who I went to a public-private school, but it still was an urban area. Mm-hmm. And then I went and taught at my first teaching experience was at an urban school, which was another school so in KCK, you have Sumner Academy. It's kind of where all the smart kids go. You test to get in. I don't care what people say. That's where everybody wants their kid to go in KCK. And so then I went and taught at one of the other 5 schools. So I really learned what that experience was like.
Yeah.
Working with kids that didn't make it into Sumner.
And they this culture, the kids carry that.
Oh,
when the
big time.
first time I heard them say it, it kind of threw me off. They're like, "Oh, we're here because we didn't get into Sumner." I'm like, "There's 6 schools out here.
Right. It's a mindset.
Not everyone's gonna get into one."
Now, indirectly, you said I'm a failure because I didn't get into Sumner. And so what happens is, you talk about this creativity and this allowing. So my mindset is you have to have structures, you have to have policies, you have to have these procedures in place so people can know what to do in case of whatever happens. So, for example, I took over a school who's in we're in a suburban area, and lunchtime for middle school students, they would be able to go get their lunch. It's kind of set up in like a college, high school type. They go get their lunch. They would be able to go sit down. They would sit down. Whenever they were done, they'd raise their hand. We'd dismiss them. They could either go outside. They could go to the gym. They had the flexibility. Teachers would pick them up in one spot, and they would all back go to the class. There was a lot of flexibility. I was like, oh my God, it's 300 middle school kids. So things would start happening. So if we were all outside, kids could leave the premises. They, whatnot. There's not fights, but like people playing, running back and forth. It was just too much. I didn't have any control. But I was also cleaning up all the messes that would happen during lunchtime. So-and-so hit me. So-and-so pushed me. So-and-so got picked up and left the school. And I'm like, oh, really? I didn't know that. So all these things are happening at the school during lunchtime that I couldn't. So what we did at December, we changed it to where I had 2 lunch periods. And I had all of 6th grade and half of 7th grade in one lunch period, half of 7th grade and all of 8th grade in one lunch period. And we gave the teachers assigned seats. So like each teacher had 4 or 5 tables, and you could sit anywhere within those 5 tables. What happens when a parent comes during lunchtime to pick their kid up? Hell, I don't know where they're at. So now I can say, oh, they're in Mrs. So-and-so's class. They're at table, whatever. So we can find kids during a chaotic time. And 2, we know if people are throwing food, if they're not cleaning up their messes, we know what kids are sitting there. Maybe that's a little too controlled. But what it was is for 25 minutes, I knew everybody was going to be in that cafeteria. And then what the responsibility was, the bell would ring and then you would go back to class. And so I'm not having to deal with Fight Club in the bathroom. I'm not having to deal with people kissing and making out in the bathroom because they have this freedom. Because remember, in the contract, teachers don't have to work lunch duty. So I'm having to pay people to work a lunch duty. So we were understaffed trying to supervise and watch all this stuff. So we made decisions based off of the FT supervision, you know, and what we felt was best for kids. You know, if I'm responsible for these 300 kids during the 25-minute time, I can't let you run all over the building because of all these other things that are happening, you know, and you're like, well, why was Sally and John making out? I don't know. I wasn't by the bathroom, you know, or, you know, those type of things. You know, people would skip their lunch to go have fun with their friends. And so we had to have a controlled environment. Oh, my God. You would have thought I told these kids or the parents that they couldn't eat lunch because their freedom had been retracted. You know, what do you mean my kid can't leave and go? Because that was the norm. And I'm thinking of all the things. So what's not publicized is the things that the principals have to deal with behind the scenes. Because of this structure, I have to deal with X, Y, and Z. It's not public knowledge. And I'm thinking that doesn't make sense. That's crazy. So now I can have a better environment where it's safe. And I'm not dealing with these different type of situations. But the community resisted against it because it was change. So what I'm saying, at Schlegel High School or at a high school, kids were all in one area. There was no freedom. You didn't get to walk around the building. You get, you know, all these things. Boom, 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 boom. That was the norm. Wasn't nobody question anything.
You kind of roll with it.
Because if I let kids in sometimes that environment, they're leaving and not coming back. They smoking weed in the bathroom. These are just real life situations. Call it what it is. So I'm like, man, I'm not about to be on the news or in the newspaper because these kids have so much freedom. So I'm thinking about automatically all the things that they can. You know, even though we do a good job at taking care of stuff in house, so you don't hear about the kid that brought what's it called? What's those edibles? Just eating them. You know, you don't hear about
They're edible. They're called
the
edible.
edibles. Yeah.
It's called a Tide Pod.
The brownie.
different
The
edible.
brownie that everyone passed out and we're like, oh, I got kids sick because they had a brownie. You know, so you don't hear about that. You don't hear about that in my community because these are real life situations. But I bet if we were under the microscope like the urban school district and they found out all the things that we deal with during lunchtime, then people may say, oh, we need to rethink that. And we've had less infractions during lunchtime this semester because we've kind of scaled it back and said, hey, you guys can have some freedom, but you're going to stay in this cafeteria for 25 minutes and be released to go back to class. My point is that some structures and some things have been put in place to avoid just catastrophes, you know. But in communities where they've been given the freedom or they feel that privilege, it's really what we're talking about. The privilege to be able to do those things is like, how dare you? We've always done that. Nothing's really, our kids won't do that. Like hell, they won't. They will do that.
It's the starting place.
We just don't talk about it.
The privilege that you have from the start, as you age and as you grow, you realize, you recognize, and you kind of don't realize until it starts to either be taken from you or given more privilege.
It's just like at the high school. My son has open lunch, and so when I was an assistant principal at the high school, it would drive me crazy. So you have 25 minutes to go eat lunch to the surrounding place, but you look at the numbers. Kids are late back from lunch. Kids don't come back from lunch. You catch kids doing all these different things, but yet we still have it because that's what the community's been used to, and that's what they do. And so if you took or closed open lunch in where I work, you would have thought there'd be a lot of upset people.
The whole building's coming down.
Yeah, but is that really what's best for kids?
I don't know. It's a thin line. I think, and this is, it's a thin line, and that's why I love Katie's point of like, I don't know the words used, but what can you like not do? What is it you can't not do?
We can't afford not to.
You can't afford not to do because so many things are like a thin line and. What? It's this podcast. What is it you can't afford? What? And I can't remember what you said. What did you say?
We can't afford to not keep having conversations.
We can't afford to not do this podcast.
Can't afford not to have conversations.
What are you gonna say, Rachel?
Keith, I really respect hearing your side of things because I'm so in La La Land on the other side. You know, it's like nice to like hear that just like realistic like, okay, come down now because like this is the shit that's gonna happen when we do give kids that space. I just wonder if, you know, in a perfect world, students have the freedom and they understand the consequences of their actions, and that's life.
Right.
Especially, you know, so many of my kiddos, and I teach kindergarten through 8th grade.
Okay.
And by 4th grade, so many of my kids are grown, and they're not yet, you know, but the amount of responsibility that they already have,
Right.
you know, I feel like it's like a matter of how to learn from lessons and like make good choices rather than like, here are the rules, or, you know, here's the box that you're in. And I don't know, I just wonder if there's a way, a perfect world to.
There's teachable moments all the time, and I am for creativity and I am for that, but then also I'm held accountable too by the bosses, because you better believe they're getting calls every day about things that happen in buildings, and how are we keeping kids safe, and how are we, you know, holding people accountable and all those things. So I have to answer to another stakeholder. So the important thing is telling you the why. As a teacher in my building, or a teacher that is looking for hey, I have an idea and I think this is what's best for kids, and I'm saying, you know, run with that. But let's think about these 4 or 5 things as we go through that. So you don't want to stifle or stunt anybody's imagination when it comes to being creative in the classroom, but you have to think about all those things that we don't think about. When I was a classroom teacher, there's things that I was like, this is what's best for my classroom and what I want to do. How does that impact, you know, the bigger picture? And you got politics too. Some people might say, hey, that's not fair that they get to do that at X school. Why can't we do that at Y school? We might have funding at this school to do it. You know, it's just so many factors that go into the reason why things get shut down, or why, you know, things don't happen. Well, and that's what's not fair.
And you use the key phrase, which you said, we make decisions around stakeholders and not users at school. I mean, the stakeholders are what drive the way we do school, and it's primarily the stakeholders of parents. And like we said earlier, it's it's because it's working for them on some level. It's, you know, like functionally from day to day, it's working for them. It has, and I'm not saying worked for them necessarily in their careers. I'm saying it's on their day-to-day level of it fits their. Yeah, I mean it's daycare extended as far as like, I know my kid is going to be safe, etc. But I think the stakeholder of industry is now popping up as like, we aren't meeting the need of that stakeholder, but really like we hardly ever really make the decisions for students as the main stakeholders. I mean, the decision makers aren't the users, you know, in this industry.
We could. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Brad, because this is. We could keep going, but I want to make sure that we take this time before if we break for a meal. Is I would love to go around and for everyone to share what part of their life story, right? Like as you think back to in your life and your experiences and the things you've been through, and like what part of that life story, it could be a day, it could be a decade, a moment. What part of your life story has impacted you the most, has meant the most to you? We can start wherever. We go all the way around.
I'll start while the microphone's still in my face, and I might have to jump out here in a second. I was a Teach for America Corps member in Houston in 2009, and there was a couple of very defining moments in those 2 years for me, but one was when I walked into my classroom for the first time. It was a trailer with outdoor hallways. The outdoor hallways were like flooding. We had like dogs from the neighborhood that wandered into our hallways, and I was constantly put in a position where I had to convince students that these things were like just a normal part of school.
How old are they?
They were 5th graders, and they were largely second generation immigrants. Their parents were as much afraid and figuring out navigating the American school system as anybody. And when I walked into my trailer classroom for the first time, there was literally nothing in it. I went and panic emailed a bunch of friends and family, and they started like sending me down books and cars and crazy things. And that experience, I didn't even feel like I was in the same country. Constantly remembering that I grew up and went to school in the same country where I was at and what I was doing, and even I was just like figuring things out. I was not a good like beginning teacher, as like no one is, but I couldn't believe that this was acceptable in the same country. And then another defining moment in that same year was I went on a school visit trip, because we do these things to expand our vision, and I went in the same city to a school that was kind of like the equivalent of our Pembroke. It was called St. John's. And there were kindergartners were doing algebra. They were literally like pushing little manipulatives around, saying like X is greater than like however, and like X is, and I was like just crying. And I went into the 5th grade classroom, and they were just, their teacher wasn't there that day. I don't even know if there was an adult in the room, and they were writing, like creating their own epic Greek poem. And I was traumatized, motivated, however you want to like say by that event. I was completely torn and angered, and those were why I'm in the work that I'm in now, is to like reconcile those worlds of like what school should look like for every kid.
I was thinking about a defining moment would be either the year before I got, first year teaching. One of my students was killed. One of my students, you kind of probably heard about the story of Scott. Scott was a young man that was in our mentoring program. We had an all-male boys program. We met every Wednesday for 3 years. And 2 of the years I was not a teacher. I still was working in corporate America. And then once I got into the field of education, I was teaching. But so his senior year, he had got an offer to play football, and he was coming home from football practice in the summer, and he was dropping his little sister off. He dropped his sister off. This is right in front of his house. He gets in the car. A 13-year-old girl stands him up, shoots him in the head. He dies right there. So all the boys in the program were just impacted, and so it was kind of like, how do I help you have a voice in gun patrol? All the things, all the different layers of how now you have an opportunity not to take for granted college and all these other scholarships, all these other different things. And I just felt like, boom, this is my purpose. Working with young people, especially from a academic standpoint, but those social skills, that life lesson, and just to see. And it was interesting too, every year while I taught in the urban school district, I lost a kid. And what that looks like when you're teaching and the seat's empty where you remember so-and-so was there. But by year 5, year 4, year 5, it was just something that you expected.
This year. Yeah.
Right. Where year 1, I couldn't sleep. I took it home with me. And it's like, how do we be preventative? Well, you really can't, because you can't control. Like, you can just teach kids sometimes to make good decisions. But in Scott's case, it wasn't. He was just dropping his. It was a 13-year-old girl being initiated into a gang took his life.
Hey, I'm Brad. How you doing? Nice to meet you. Chef J. Dude, I haven't taken in a bite, and I already love your show, man.
How you living, Chef?
I'm good. How are you?
Blessed, man. One day at a time, man. One day at a time. Especially, man. Eat, man. Please have a meal. Please enjoy yourself. Yeah, dude. Huh?
Did you miss me?
Yeah. I tend to run out of words around this time of the evening. One day at a time. It's good? It's good? Yeah, I know you never get tired of that, man. When people just be like, speechless.
Right here.
Just
like,
it swells up on you. You gotta take it, ease into it. Your cheeks gonna get hard.
where do you learn this?
That's the thing. You can't teach what Chef J knows.
You want to tell them our conversation about tonight's meal?
You can't. Here's the thing. You can't teach what Chef J knows. This is literally what it came to. He was like, "Hey man, just have some things and I'll figure it out."
That's what I couldn't think of that this week. I was like, just get something. I'll just figure it out when I get here.
And I'm not saying this to appease, but this has been in my mouth for like 30 seconds, and my mouth hasn't stopped watering. That is crazy.
Thank you.
So tell me about the sauce.
Yeah, break it down.
Tomato cream sauce. Put a lot of lemon in there. No cheese at all, so it's just tomato sauce, something that I made, that I brought here. That's pretty much it. I don't want to make it spicy. If I was at home, I probably would add a real spice to it too. Just everybody like it, but keep it a little general.
It's my favorite part of the night, man.
Oh, damn.
Man, so if you would like, Chef, that you can break down, you know, whatever part of the meal you would like to.
Where did I meet the?
So, all of the, Chef, nice to meet you.
How you doing? Keith?
Good.
Hey, how are you?
All it is here is just like tomato, cream pasta sauce. A lot of lemon so you can get a lot of acidity coming. Palate, asparagus, carrots, chicken. Kept it pretty simple. A little Parmesan cheese. Pretty much it. I just told him to get some stuff and I'll figure it out when I got here. So. It's like a little medley. That's what I just call it.
So it'd be nice to be like, I'm in the book song.
Man.
I told him, I was like, my mouth has to stop watering. It's ridiculous.
Hey,
So I met the.
this is my favorite time of the night.
Where did I meet the Rudy Jeans?
We already, hey, I think everyone understands.
Damn, okay.
Said, damn.
Me or are you asking Adam? It was probably connected.
Yeah, focus on that. Oh yeah. Look at the slices. Look at the slices. The slices of the meat.
That's it. It was the innovation.
Top
Yes. So the guy was up on stage with that and was interviewing. Yeah.
You gotta get my man to come chef for some of your teachers, man. Nah, he's not bad, man. He could.
I'm telling you.
Two things for me, I think, was the experience with the village, which was completely unplanned. First neighborhood that got Google Fiber, and the thousands of people that visited. Having grown up in Kansas City, never really being a place that like inspired me. It was just home. It was comfortable, and to see this little enclave of tech and entrepreneurial energy. Just inspiring people, and how many people flocked to it, whether it's students or civic leaders or whoever, in the way media wanted to tell. Like, I was like, why? Like, just seeing how this thing that was nothing but a bunch of volunteers and entrepreneurs, like, just inspired people to think and dream differently than I've ever seen in my hometown. That was transformative, and that still captivates me, and I believe very much, like I said earlier, that entrepreneurial spirit is just if not one of the biggest catalysts for positive change that there is. The other moment I was talking to you earlier that definitely changed my life and motivated me and gave me perspective I didn't have was the day I met Daniel Edwards. That was the first day that I realized that there are divisions in this community that I was very unaware of.
What year was it?
That was just 2 years ago. For me, and of course you know, but you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's where I just met.
Until you know, then you can't unknow.
I met a friend that lived in a different world than me 2 miles away, right? And I think that realization has taken me on a very intentional journey forward of now, you know, one of those questions where if someone had asked me the day before I met Daniel, if you invited 100 of your closest friends to your birthday party, what would they look like? I think every single one of them would have been white. That wasn't like intentional. I think they just would have been. You know, it's not like now it's 50-50 or anything, but like now it ain't 100%, right? And it's not based on, I now can check that box, but like I've learned more from Daniel and Donald and Dre and some of the other guys, like just fundamentally understanding the world than I ever could have before. And they grew up a few miles from me, right? And that now drives me beyond, you know, where I realized before the community I knew was white, middle, upper class. The community I live in is not, right? Like in understanding that. So those are the two pieces for me that I think are fundamental to me today and the work we do.
And I hate to pull it down into one single metric. But if they're outside of my wife and children, right? In my professional life, when Independence this year found out that we had achieved 95% of our performance points. It was two things. A, it was sort of culminating because what we did 5 years ago is we said we can transform high schools. We can go wall to wall and offer every student the access to participate in course sequences that are aligned both to college credit and to local workforce development. And 5 years later, listen, people will debate all day long. APR is just, they're measuring the wrong stuff. Listen, it is the measure. It's attendance, it's graduation rate, it's ACT, it's a lot of things. The day that became official, I mean, it was magical. And at the same time, it was like, all right, what's next, right? So just knowing that you can take an organization in which thousands of people work for tens of thousands of students, and over a 5-year period, you can make absolutely measurable impact.
I'll share a moment that happened yesterday.
Yes, I love it.
I think in 5 years I'll probably still maybe think about it. So
Oh,
that's why
wow.
I'm going to share it. I was at dinner, headed to a surge meeting, which I go to monthly, showing up for racial justice, an affinity group for white people, primarily, who are for racial justice. And I was at dinner with people who were not intending on going, right? We're just grabbing dinner. And I obviously offered an invitation, like, you should come. It's great. Like, it's worth your time. I think you'll enjoy it. And the friend, and he's a good guy, but was like, yeah, I think that would just, like, be really exhausting. But that's a really nice hobby. Like, it's a really nice hobby that you have.
Wow.
And it wasn't intentional, but it's like, man, caring about these things isn't a hobby. Nobody who cares about, like, educational justice or racial justice or nobody wants that to be their hobby. So that was, like, just really, I've been thinking about that a lot.
And this is who we have in the classroom teaching our kids. That's what I'm talking about.
That it's a choice, you know,
Sorry.
and that it's a choice. I had to wrap it took me a while to wrap my mind around, cause like you're just who you are, and so you don't realize like the things that other people think that you don't think with that whole thing. And when I realized it's a choice for some people. When you're a person of color, it's not a choice. It's like it's just your life, you know, and like that. But that helped me a lot in like rationing. And having conversation once I realized everyone doesn't look at it as severely as I do, and being empathetic to like, okay.
So just over time it builds, or it's just like the food is so fire, it just looks so good, people follow, and like how are you building your audience on IG?
Me personally, I think it's just being me. That's just the only honest, truthful answer that I can give you. I'm not putting on a front of who I am. I'm not acting, out in a certain way. It's like I'm being me. I'm showing my same personality when I'm on my Insta story. You know what I'm saying? I'm listening to music. I'm singing Drake. You know what I'm saying? I'm actually having fun. And, and still people are willing to do business with me. So it's, I think being yourself, showing the personality that I have, the professionalism that I can show, the food that I can make, it's just being me, Chef J.
Do you think, like, was it just your luck of the draw in terms of like cooking and like having that thing that it worked for you? Do you think everyone should have like that thing for them, or like the idea of like being a master at one thing versus like knowing how to do a lot of things? Like, do you believe everyone should like find that one thing, or?
you know what, I can't. I straddle both sides of the fence with this because, you know, I find myself in this right now. It's, you know what, it's good to master one thing first. I feel like if you love it, master it, because then it can open up, you know, more opportunities. Tomorrow, my mobile app is releasing. You hungry? You hungry? You know,
we hungry.
Whoever thought I, you know, be doing anything in the technical field, you know, what I'm saying, working with people like that. So opening up doors, you know, what I'm saying, I got a couple. I'm not gonna mention these things, but I got a couple more things, you know, what I'm saying, in the works. You know, what I'm saying, with some of my NFL players, you know what I'm saying, actually trying to go into business. So I would definitely say, what if it's a craft that you loved, or if it's that thing that you love, master that, become the best at it, because it can open up so many more doors. And this is what we're about to work on, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a whole different door. Just think about it. If I get this, we're not telling them what it is, because hopefully I can give them an announcement to actually
later
give it, you know what I'm saying?
Later.
But if this happens, think about what doors really could open up for me. Think about what I just told you, because I'm still chefing, but what I'm going for is something that's in need in so many things, like, you know, just the Grammys, you know, just some ESPYs. Like, what if I give off that personality and that feeling, that vibe so much that
you open that door?
Yeah.
What grounds you, man? Like, what grounds you? It's a lot twirling around, man. Like, what do you hold on to when it's all said?
God.
Facts. Big facts.
God, you know, I'm very religious, you know what I'm saying? It's God, because at the end of the day, you know, so nothing can happen. Nothing that I've ever done could be done without him. That's where my faith comes from. Because I've been in the scariest situations, the most messed up situations ever. Ever. And that's just who's been there for me at all times, and who I could talk to at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying? I can only tell my mentor so much. I only could tell my mom so much. I only could tell you so much, Jay so much, Tay so much. But at the end of the day, that's who knows.
He already know.
Exactly.
It just my mom used to always say, he already know. It just depends if you're gonna tell him or not. Like, we hold things from God like he don't already know. Like, he ain't God. He already know.
Exactly.
Might as well. But you're not gonna be transformed by it until you talk to him about it.
Exactly. And just being honest with yourself, you know. You gotta be.
Man, that's a good way to end that. Yeah. Self-suggestions. We gotta have some type of like, I don't know what we're gonna do, man. Love.
Right, and let's clap it in for sure.
Yeah! Come on,
Yeah!
How y'all doing? What's up?
Oh man, feeding the people, man.
Man, trying to.
Feeding the people, man. Oh,
Sit down.
I know you guys were like, oh, this is every week, yo. Every week we're like, oh yeah. Favorite part of the show. What you got? Is that true? Was that what? Is that three words put into one? The man knows what he's doing. Man, okay, so this last segment, Innovator's Toolbox. So I want to take advantage of no, please God, of the amazing knowledge in this room, and kind of like what might be like, I don't know the right word, right, but like of what happens at scale in all of our lives that we can like try to like really do right now. So this time, how can we take this idea, right, of this Innovator's Toolbox and try to use it as a true platform to create tactical takeaways and actionable steps. And I'm gonna jump ship and throw Adam in the spot and ask you to help me walk through this and think about this, and whether it be that the same format, we start with the challenge, and we could fish from one that we've talked about here today, or should we start with that challenge and then brainstorm around, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's great. I think there's a lot of very practical experience and kind of action-oriented, people working to create those avenues for people to kind of reinvent education here. So I think that makes sense. The way we like to think about it is, first you have to build awareness, right? If without awareness and beginning a conversation to challenge the way people are thinking and thoughtfully create discomfort, right? Like change is not going to happen. So I think, maybe brainstorming some ways just to start building some awareness in some of the change that may need to happen. Then, from there, then it's engagement, then it's implementation, then what we kind of talk about is reinforcement. How do you go back? But I think, to me, it's how I think a lot of people, hopefully, a lot of people will be listening to this that haven't begun this journey for them, that are very comfortable, and so, what are some things I think would be really interesting? I mean, going through TFA, right, and not having been, I think you have a unique, would have, I think everyone here has a really unique one, but I was particularly interested, like, for those in education that are kind of ingrained in education, what are things that you might be the first things to recommend is to kind of start to challenge the paradigm or to open your eyes a little bit?
For, you're saying?
Let's start with teachers.
Okay, but a teacher that's a traditional teacher, or a teacher from my non-traditional?
Traditional. I mean, the most are traditional, so let's start with the.
So
that's the hardest to move.
I like the way that you said it. Teachers are already like working at capacity now. I believe that people's capacities look different, right? 24-hour, 8-hour, 9-hour type of people. There's all different types of people. So I think just like giving teachers like the information, but like also starting with like recognizing like you're not doing anything wrong, like you're working extremely hard. We value that. I want to validate that, and I want to like offer this opportunity and like give them the space to like learn something new, right? If a teacher is being told be more innovative in your classroom and like that's how you're leaving it.
Who are you talking to right now? Who are you giving this advice to? To a teacher?
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
Right. So
Yeah.
No, I was gonna say that I'm brainstorming, sitting as you guys are talking. I would model this for teachers.
yeah, and one of the things for us, a couple of things in our kind of toolbox of awareness building offerings. One is the documentary Most Likely to Succeed. Have you seen that yet? It's a really award-winning documentary that looks at the history of education, basically how do we get to this point, the impact of technology on the workforce, which is really powerful, and then dives into a case study of High Tech High out of San Diego, and you follow a couple students through a year of this very unstructured, like true project-based learning, and it's undeniable the impact on those freshmen by the end. So one thing for us is, and just in general, this is absolutely, I don't want this to be about pumping things we do, but we believe very much that's a film that's a great way to third party, well done, shift your perspective with a lot of data on what might be wrong with education and where we maybe should go.
What's the name of it?
So it's Most Likely to Succeed.
Or like what works for some spaces, because certainly High Tech High.
Oh yeah, no, and this again,
But it's fascinating, right? It's amazing to see what you do.
Brad, is there a particular book? So I'd like, so here's a documentary. Is there a particular book or thing that someone could watch or read on their own that you've seen that's been kind of fundamental to kind of changing your perspective, or even you were?
Who's my audience?
Right now, let's focus on teachers, like the traditional teacher. I think that's the biggest group of teacher leaders too. Could fall into.
There's a book called There's a book called Little Bets.
Little Bets.
Little Bets. and I got it in Denver. It's by Peter Sims. And it's basically, people will always they will always work to whatever ceiling you create for them, right? So make little bets, right? Start risk taking at a small level. And like I said, I got it in Denver. We were looking at School Retool, which is a place where Kaufman is now like sponsoring leaders to go through this School Retool process. If you get it, it's awesome. I love how it's directed to, because it's directed at building leaders. It's teaching building leaders how to hack. You know, I'm going to hack this, I'm going to hack this, I'm going to hack this, and here's the really cool part about it is that building leader, if you see that building leader making those little bets and taking those little risks, if I can't expect anybody to ever exceed my capacity or my example, and my example is taking little risks, then there you go.
I have paper. They showed the last two school districts that I've been in. They've showed Paper Tigers, where it talks about documentary that deals with the mental health and trauma and focusing on ACEs and really learning what that's about. So basically, understanding the students or the clientele that you're servicing. I think that's the first. Bringing awareness to who's sitting in the seats that you're teaching, and not realizing that everyone's not at the same starting point that we think they are when they come into our classroom. So, Paper Tigers was Lincoln High School in Walla Walla, D.C., Washington, D.C., where they did this year project with them in capturing that data, capturing that what it's like from that perspective. And so I think it's really helps us see, what does school look like for not just particular kids, but how can we service everyone, all kids?
Yeah. So another book, actually Donna Deeds recommended, who started CAPS, Blue Valley, Blue Valley, and so she really does transformative work. She said The Same Thing Over and Over by Friedrich Hess. The Same Thing Over and Over.
And what do you feel like is the...
Well, I mean, and again, I want to not, since I haven't read it, but it's, so just the overview it says here is, so in this genial and challenging overview of endless debates over school reform, Rick Hess shows that even bitter opponents in debates about how to improve school agree on much more than they realize, and that much of it must change radically. So I think it's the way I think I remember her describing it is, again, shows very polar different views of education, but then ultimately he kind of again talks you through how, like, we're not that far apart if we can just kind of
we're a lot more alike than you are.
Right. I think we find that in life with almost everything. But that was another one.
So here's,
well, I mean, again, I want to, since I haven't read it,
it's by the Arbinger Institute. So it's not it's written by researchers. So there's not a whole lot of jokes, but there are a ton of stories in it. And essentially what it says is when I wake up, right, and I don't care if I'm talking family, work, whatever organization with whom I'm engaged, my focus becomes outward. I think a lot of the trouble, a lot of the history that people refer to about public education comes from their history, and I'm only as good as the last interaction you had. It's highly likely that the last person with whom you interacted was very inward, defensive, protecting their turf and their employment and things of that nature. The outward mindset, basically, it talks about the psychology of serving others, and then it gives you a path to move forward. And it's had a huge impact on me.
One question I'd like to ask here that's been interesting to me. So kind of packaging great literature and for what reasons, great films and for what reasons. And I wrote down a question that would be interesting to try to put into this, which was if you could handpick 5 perfect champions, they could be people or they could be a position, a space that they occupy to rally you behind your work. If you can name up the 5 right now, or if you like practically, right, like, and as you look at a city, who would those perfect champions be?
Teachers. Empowering and enabling teachers is where it is, and
That's
you
more
know,
than 5 people, though.
it is. But he said 5 people are groups, and that is one group.
Or a space someone occupies. That's one.
So,
Teacher.
back off, Dondo. You talked, Keith talked about modeling. Again, great example. I'm going to take 18 steps back and say, before we model, let's figure out what it is we want to model. Mm-hmm. What do you say we go talk to 500 teachers? And not with a device that allows them to Likert scale 1 through 5, but actually collect qualitative data on what resources they have. What are you lacking? Let's really dissect professional training for teachers.
Mm-hmm. It's for the sake of, right, just for the sake of the question, teacher being one of those, maybe we come up with these 5 together. The teacher is one. Like, who would the other 4 perfect champions be?
Industry leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. CEOs.
That's did your thought go all the way to the top? Like,
I was going.
Because they control the people. They control the strings. I mean, behind who controls the dollars and or policy. And
Well,
so
I mean,
It's
if
often the same, right?
well,
they have to at least be somewhere in this. We can't do all this thinking and brainstorming, and we have all these champions. But it's been plenty of times I've had great ideas, or people in the communities have great ideas, but it gets to a point where it falls on a deaf ear or hits a brick wall because you don't have the right people on board. Mm-hmm. And whether it's the politicians, whether it's people who are controlling the money that gets into the school system,
mm-hmm.
all that makes a difference when it comes to making it actually happen.
It doesn't, believe it or not, I mean, transformation doesn't take a ton of money.
Mhm.
no, I don't.
We've done our work with $70,000 a year, and that's ridiculously cheap. And I'll say this, when you involve industry, depending on what you're doing, you want different people, right? We have a CEO Champions Committee so that the CEOs have a place to go, because no offense to them, but if we're working on curriculum, I don't need a CEO in the room. I don't need a superintendent in the room. I need a teacher and a worker bee. But there's a place for
But exactly, the idea that there's a place, right?
Yep.
That there's a unique place for each.
But I think the other than obviously the student, the person that went through the education system, I mean, where I'm seeing from the industry side is the biggest obstacle facing growing companies now is talent. Right? There's just not good people to hire. I mean, we have plowed through entry-level employees because they can't think for themselves. And we've countless 2 interns we had to fire, help find something else, right? Because we didn't have the time. Because we didn't have the time to give them the structure they need to succeed, right? Yeah.
What do we teach the kids the things they need to know? Usually you learn all the things you shouldn't do in your first job. What I'm learning, and so the benefit of learning it through in high school or earlier.
You save that one mistake. I want to try to I normally don't do this. I enjoy not doing it, but for the sake of, I want to challenge us to. And so I'm curious of who would you, if you sum that, are you summing it up as being the student? Who are you summing up that champion, one of those perfect champions being?
So I think it's vital that, because I believe the world of education is not going to solve education's problems. I think it's going to come from the outside and from entrepreneurial type people. I think even corporations themselves are caught up in the education system by requiring degrees, looking at GPA, looking at all these things that are fundamentally flawed in measuring all these soft skills we've been talking about the entire time. The things that my brother sucked at that he just is instinctually good at. So again, I'm coming back to that. I think another essential stakeholder group in this are parents. In the sense of they need we're talking about these massive groups of people, but as one of the key stakeholders you have to listen to every day, or either the completely disengaged parent that doesn't hold their kid accountable to anything, or the helicopter parent that micromanages every element of their students' lives, right? I mean, those are the ones. And so I think that's one of the things, we're talking about the stakeholders of education here. But I mean, this is one thing, in that film, most likely to succeed, one thing I really like that they do is they show the struggle of parents. They see their kids having these transformational experiences, and when you see it, you just know, right? Like you just cooking, and being a chef through high school, like you can just see that you're getting better at it. But how do you test? And then you see, so the parents I see my kid growing, but how do I know they're going to get a better ACT score to get into college, which is what it requires, right? And you see this parents are in this because they want what's best, and they still think you have to go to the best college possible type thing, and some of industry actually rewards that, right? A lot of big corporations do. So it's this feedback loop.
So would one, and the exact organization I'm thinking of is Mission U. Are any of you familiar with Mission U? Started by a guy named Adam Braun, who started Pencils of Promise. Boom, we got one in the house. You guys in Pencils of Promise? Is there two? The organization, Pencils of Promise? Nobody? What? Pencils of Promise. They build schools overseas. Yeah, it's an unbelievable organization, unbelievable guy. But he started an organization called Mission U, partnered with so now this goes into how much you are all the way sold on kind of technology and working in IT and that whole world that's being created. But he went out and partnered with 4 or 5 the most dominating tech companies, like Twitter level, and created a 1-year with what I think he's calling it a higher ed alternative, and they only accept, I think, 25 out of 10,000 kids that apply. One student from Blue Valley Caps was actually just accepted. And it's free college, guaranteed a job with one of these top 4 tech firms if you get accepted, and they look for nothing that Harvard would look for.
Yeah.
To that point of but I think that window is so there's so many colleges out there, right? That those alternatives are so small that trying to bank on getting into that.
Right.
But could a champion be in that space?
Well, I mean, higher ed, absolutely. A good example is William Jewell. They offer a $4,000, no questions asked scholarship. Now, it's a private school and it's expensive, and $4,000 is a relatively small drop in the bucket. But a $4,000, no questions asked scholarship to any CAPS graduate, because they know inherently the skills they're learning through CAPS is the type of skills that they want. And there's no test that measures how strong your soft skills are and being able to articulate your idea, right, and those things. So they just literally offer a $4,000 no question asked scholarship.
I'm curious for you too, in higher ed, could that space, to any degree, right, that is shaped, could that space be a perfect champion for trying to innovate the space?
Absolutely. I mean, I teach doc classes. Tomorrow night I'm helping 19 people work through their dissertation proposal. It can be and it should be, because if we change the shape of high school from a square into a circle, and all of these kids are going to graduate and try to go to college, they're sitting there with a bunch of squares, and they've got to have an ACT score, and they've got to have a GPA, and they've got to have, then that's why
Do you want to drill it down though more specifically than, you know, who in higher education and yeah, being accepted in, just getting accepted into the university? And
Yeah, I mean, as long as you're looking at ACT scores on who gets in, my brother will never get in.
Yeah. I think
Right?
a true liberal arts school is trying.
Maybe.
No, it's like you were listening on my conversation in the car, because I have a 17-year-old that took the ACT, didn't do very well, but has a 2.8 GPA. And so I was talking to another student. They said, hey, well, you know, I have a cousin that got a, 16 or 17 on their ACT and had a 2.8 and went to a historically black college and turned into a better student because they were around people that motivated, cultivate who they were. And so they had a different experience. But if they hadn't have been given an opportunity to go to college, they never would have found out who they were, because once they got around other motivated people, it motivated them to be better. And so therefore you have this success story with this person graduating with a 4.0 that's going on to do great things, but wouldn't have gotten the opportunity if we just stuck to these requirements and criteria. So how do we, give the kid that we don't think is college material, or we don't, maybe don't have the criteria? How do we do that?
When you asked this question, what were you looking for? Were you looking for more like individuals? Were you looking for groups of people?
It depends how personal the relationships are. So I don't think anyone in here has went to K-State. No. Huh? You went to K-State? Do you know Larry? Larry Mader?
Oh, no.
So Uncle Larry, we call him. Uncle Larry he's the vice president of, like, I don't know, the finance, I don't know. Larry pulls money out of God knows where for people. Like, he literally, people I've seen, and I've been in one of these, I can attest, he's probably $20,000. Like, I don't know where this money came from, right? Like, Larry's one of the people I would put in here for myself, only because I know Larry. It wouldn't just be the financial aid. It wouldn't be the vice president of financial aid. It would be Larry.
So who are the?
I mean, because
It was
honestly,
Uncle
I
Larry.
was thinking about that too. I was like, well, what do you mean by? Because, like me personally, and this is, no disrespect or anything, I'm not saying like teachers are my first thing on my list is champions. Not even on my top 5 is champions. And you know how much I have respect for teachers as well too. My top 5 champions would be people that I relate to. That's what has helped pull me through everything that I've been through, and how I've grown up. The lack of everything I've grown up. So, me per se, my champions would be somebody like LeBron James. Somebody who came from nothing, grew up without a father, because that's somebody like me. I'm not choking up, I promise. But yeah, LeBron James. Another champion of mine would be Drake, because his music is my life. Like, everything that he says, I relate to or I feel, and that's what I listen to pull me out of anger or out of sadness or out of, anything, what I'm saying, to get me motivated. Another champions would be barbers, because, and let me not say, I'm gonna say traditional old school barbers who put you up on game, knowledge, life, how to, tighten your belt up, keep your pants up, how to be a man. Barbers, traditional barbers are true champions. And I would say my mom is a true champion. You know what I'm saying? She had me at 14 years old and stayed in school, got her doctorates, and watching her son become somebody great, that's a champion. I'm doing everything that I'm doing for her. So I don't necessarily look at classical, that's what I'm going to say, classical things as champions. And that's what I think that this new generation coming up, and I do a lot of outreach, and it's amazed me so much that I've been able to pull so many young men out of depressions. I talked to a suicidal kid, you know what I'm saying, and he's been reaching out all the time, and he's happy, you know what I'm saying, he's loving life because, he could relate to me, you know what I'm saying. So this generation, this young generation, and I want to say this to the older generation, if you guys want to get to this next generation and to your students, you gotta have people who relate to them. You know, they have to feel it. They have to see even somebody. You know, I'm 22. I'm the fresh 22. They just was meeting a 21-year-old chef that's working with celebrities, athletes, that's traveling, that's living his life. You know what I'm saying? So if they're seeing that, or just seeing somebody else in the community that's coming back, and if you guys are finding these people, like, kids are gonna get excited about that stuff. I never in my life knew that I can grab young men's attention. Young men, because I always grew up like, I'm not listening, because when I was coming up in school, they was always, you know, bringing in people that I couldn't relate to, or, you know, and you just see people falling asleep, you know, when guest speakers come in, because they're not interested. It's like, oh, this is, it's not me. Okay, they went to college, got a, you know, the 4.0 GPA or something like that. On my ACT score, I got a 13. 13. Like, you know, so.
What am I doing with this test?
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, and I don't even think, you know, that should hold you back, because I'm very knowledgeable. I just couldn't take tests. I still can't take tests. But if you talk to me, if you want to have an educated conversation, I can go deep into it. Deep. And so, you know, I just think true champions are people that you could relate to. People that actually speak to you.
I'm gonna take a second to connect those,
please.
those two, because having gone through a 5-year transition, a 5-year transformation, and actually gotten some massive outcomes, I say teachers first for two reasons. A, there's no way that the career academies and independents could be successful if they weren't driving, right? It's all about it's empowering teachers. It's not something you can mandate. The second reason I say teachers is exactly for you, Jay. It breaks my heart that they're not in your top 5, and I don't ever want a kid to graduate again without a teacher in their top 5. And I agree, it should be about building relationships, which means be vulnerable enough to relate. And I keep going back to this, but I think that's the solution will grow out from that.
Can we talk about, and I don't know how to bring this up, but is it a cultural difference? Because I can relate to both sides.
It's very evident the perspective Jay was talking from.
Because the basketball coach, the football coach, the person who was over the mentoring program, you know, if you were in Boy Scouts, if you if you went to the Boys and Girls Club, those type of organizations and people oftentimes connect in, and I don't want to put the stigma and say in low income parents, but I grew up in a single parent household as well, kind of same story, but in where I play basketball. My mom had me in the church, she had me in sports. And so you had deacons, you had people like you said, cut your hair, where they spit to you real knowledge. They took you fishing, they took you, you know, all those things that maybe your dad is supposed to do. You know, and so what I've learned in some areas with education, getting that deep or making that connection is not, it's kind of almost against the rules. So when I taught in an urban, that's how I was able to teach. Right. If I wanted him to pay attention to learn journalism or learn English, I had to first find out who he was. He had to trust me, and then we could teach English. Right. You know. But when I went to some suburban school districts, it was like, we don't want you to get too close to the kids. We want you to just teach the content. Yeah. Because most kids there came to learn. Like, I don't need a dad. Yeah. I don't need a mentor. I don't need a big brother. I just need this do this stuff. And so it was two different contrasting worlds. And the more that you get more of a melting pot of type of kids, systems are going to have to change, because now the needs are changing, because you have different type of kids in this classroom in the schools. But I can relate to both. You know, there are some great teachers that are passionate, that want to get to know you, and maybe that's why they became teachers. But then we have some teachers that don't really want to build relationships. They want to. They're not why they're not there. Right.
We could do this for a long time, but for the sake of, you have something you want to say? You have something you want to say?
Go ahead. Because let me patch this back up for my teachers. Definitely. This is for my teachers, because I want you to know how much love and respect that I really do. No, I know you do. But I want you to know this because like I said, I wouldn't say not in the top 5's not nothing, like, because it's probably my 6, you know what I'm saying, or anything like that. No, realistically, because my turning point, you know, when I talked to him a few weeks ago, I was a horrible student freshman and sophomore year. I used to get suspended, ISS, just in trouble. And I used to disrespect teachers, didn't care to listen to them until, you know, a few of them, you know what I'm saying, the ones who did care, and obviously like you guys, you know, who actually did, who like, you know, kind of put me into my place. And now, and this is what I always tell the boys, teachers are my best friends, you know what I'm saying, because I have, matter of fact, 2 teacher best friends. One is named Mr. Strickland, one is Mr. Jones. I'm not going to say no first names, but we go out and get drinks all the time now, ever since I turned 21. But it was, you know, like, but that relationship that I built with them in high school, from being that kid that didn't listen to them and didn't want to talk to them, you know, they switched my whole attitude around. And by junior year, like, I was a teacher assistant for both of them, and it was, teachers are some of my best friends. So I do love teachers. Yeah, you know what? That is I'll give that my 5th, because I named 4, so I guess that will have to be my 5.
I feel like I guilted you into that.
No,
yeah.
Definitely. Teachers could be very, 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 very important, and some students, and realistically, a lot of students, and like I said, a lot of people aren't open. You know, like I said, I'm shy, so a lot of them are not going to come out and just, you know, have that extra cry of help. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes it's like, you know, you just gotta show a little love, show a little compassion. But
you know, you also bring an elephant in the room that's kind of interesting, is that everybody doesn't have a good experience with school.
Right.
And I see that with parents. So the parent that's disengaged, sometimes it's hard to get them engaged because of their last experience in school. And if they had a negative experience, then they don't want to come up and talk to the principal or talk to the teacher. When they're like, man, you did the same thing when I was in school. In fact, I had you when I was in school, and you was a joke, and you were a joke too. So we have to reshape and have a better approach on how we deal with community and parents and kids. And so, and it's all about having not building leaders, but people in position to have that influence and to have that perspective on how schools should be ran. Because if you don't care, then I don't care. You know what I'm saying?
All right, I gotta do my job. This is entirely too beautiful of a bow for such a messy and opportunistic challenge. But for 5, I will say is ourselves. You know, like that, and I think that was such a theme at the beginning of this conversation. And that on one end, I felt like I was having a hard time pulling out of, but on the other end, so that we could have a more holistic conversation. But on the other end, I love it because that is it. You know, like I'm such a big believer. I was. Where was I walking where I saw this? Probably at school today, where it just said, be the change you want to see in the world. It was at school today in one of the counselors' rooms. I don't know like how we cultivate, like the rest of it gets really, really messy, but at the end of the day, it's like, that's what starts here. So for the love and respect of our production crew and everyone's time, and I'll put the 5th one here, and we'll close out this section with ourselves. Yeah. Let me write down. Sorry, I was excited. I get really
on the ourselves one.
Yeah.
I think one of the best people that embodies that and speaks to it very directly is Wesley Hamilton. Yeah. He talks about that all the time. Like, I mean, he was overweight. He was paralyzed. He was a single dad. He had what could easily be conceived as nothing going for him, and that's how he felt until he made the decision that wasn't going to be what defines him. And now look at him. Friggin'.
Wait, we'll close out. Where are we at, right? They say that there are 3 levels of conversation. Level 1 is when people talk about other people. Level 2 is when people talk about events. There's nothing wrong with either of those, but this is Level 3 Studio. Thank you all so much for joining us on another episode of Level 3 Studio, where we fed your body, fed your mind, and without a doubt, I hope fed your soul. That was a good one.